Hey everybody, my name is Al Nicoletti. I'm an attorney here in Florida, and welcome to the Al Nicoletti Show, where I bring on real estate super investors, rising rock stars, movers and shakers, and leaders of clubs in the community that educate, entertain, and inspire all things Florida real estate on how you can take your company to the next level. On my show today, I have Glen Friedman. He's going to love this. He is the short-term rental master and the private lending guru. Glen Friedman is super popular in the community of Jacksonville. Everybody loves Glen. I was so happy Glen was able to be on the show tonight. And it's great to get a guest that the community loves. And when I post this out there and I'm sharing it out there, everybody's immediately like, oh, we see Glen. We're going to be on the episode. We're going to come watch. There's people watching. Everybody wants to hear about short-term rentals. Everybody knows Airbnbs and all of those things could be investment gold. So we're going to dive in on this. But of course, one of the most important things to me is making sure everybody understands the guests that we have on the episodes. These are not just typical guests or anybody. These are special people. These are people entrenched in the community that love what we do and love real estate and love talking about it and educating and inspiring everybody to do better, to get more things, to get more deals. So I'm going to give a little intro of Glen. This is my opening monologue that I've been doing for a while now, making sure everybody knows the guests that we have. So he is born and bred a New Yorker. Glen's from New York. He moved to Florida 3 years ago to be closer to family. And as a lifelong entrepreneur, he wanted to get involved in real estate, but he didn't have a clue where to begin. I mean, this is a great story. We'll talk about how Glen got started. But he quickly joined JAXREIA, Jacksonville Real Estate Investor Association, and attended dozens of meetings. And at one meeting, he met an investor who was converting some long-term rentals into short-term. And he'll talk about who that is and how that all started. But he was intrigued when he bought a house on the west side, jumped in. 3 years later, Glen's doing 16 short-term Airbnb rentals and more on the way. I mean, this is somebody that does this all the time. And he now has gotten involved in private lending for flippers and has done more than 100 loans. So we'll talk about the private money, the private lending side of things. But he used to trade stocks for 8 years. He owned a multi-unit franchise. He was a licensee for Hasbro, organizing Magic, the Gathering game tournaments. And he loves life. He's enjoying it with his family. He's really active on Facebook. And something interesting that Glen wrote to me, he was like, real estate's a contact sport. You need to get out there, meet people, and do things. So it's really interesting having that perspective of somebody that's been doing the investing for a little while. And basically, we're going to learn everything about short-term rental investments and the power of private lending and how Glen can help you on your deals. So, and also, side note, this was something originally that I wanted to do and bring special guests on for the show early on in the inception of the Al Nicoletti Show, which was bringing on people that were community leaders that ran groups, hosted groups, had people come for the luncheons, the meetings, the things at night, and talking about how they run it, the best practices of them. Like, how do they do it? Who are the speakers they're looking for? How is it to run a group? Because there are certain people out there that love to run groups, and there's more people that want to host things for breakfast. So we're going to talk about that. He's not just a leader. He's a huge group leader, and he's the host of the JAXREIA meeting that meets at Whitey's Fish Camp in Orange Park, Fleming Island. They got something coming up later in the month. He'll talk about that, but it's a monthly meetup. It's great. So on the show today, the Glen Friedman, Al Nicoletti, the meeting that we're going to have on this show, I see him backstage. We're going to talk about how to go from zero to a multi-six-figure income in 3 years, absolutely knowing nothing about real estate, zero. How do you do it? Where do you start? And where's Glen today? And like, how do you do it? And why Airbnb is the hottest trend right now, and how to know if you should get involved. Are short-term rentals investment gold? That was a little thing I added there, Glen. I saw that the other day, and I was like, I got to add that in the episode. And what is private hard money lending, and why is it the greatest thing since sliced bread? I mean, there's so many things you can do with your IRA. You can lend and all the money you've accumulated with your wealth, and how you can get into private lending, and how Glen takes charge and leads a successful monthly group meeting with solid attendance. Solid. I mean, the group I went to that I did the probate presentation, there had to have been like 40 to 50 people at that lunch. We're all in a circle. We're all sitting around. I'm in the front sitting next to Glenn, and there were people in the back that were standing. I don't think there was enough chairs in the Whitey's Fish Camp. And it's just incredible. How do you do that? How do you get that solid attendance and some of the best practices? And of course, why is Pat Flynn so damn good looking, and why does he get all the breaks? We're going to talk about that. I know it's something Glenn wanted to talk about, so we're going to dive in on that. Glen Friedman, welcome to the Al Nicoletti Show. I love having you here. It's always a pleasure seeing you. I know so many people are so happy to see you on this show. So welcome.
Thanks, Al. Really do appreciate you inviting me on.
I tell you, it's amazing what you do. And I was trying to think today when I was doing all my notes for the episode, how we even met. And it's something I brought up in the intro of you. And I think we met at JAXREIA. I think there was a master class I did on probate or tax deeds. And I think I met you there. So it's fascinating how even backstage we were talking about how JAXREIA really connected everybody. It was a start for you, start really for me, and all the presentations. So Glenn, tell everybody who Glen Friedman is. How did you get started in real estate investing? Like, where were you before? Everything that you did before, and where are you today?
All right. So why don't we start with JAXREIA since you brought that up a couple times? JAXREIA is a great organization. When I moved down to the Jacksonville area 3 years ago, like you said, I wanted to get involved in real estate. Really didn't know anything. So like most people, I Googled real estate Jacksonville and JAXREIA comes up. So I went to my first JAXREIA meeting, which was a Tuesday night meeting. And who was the speaker but Gonzalo Corso? So Gonzalo's just a wonderful speaker. And by the end of the night, not only did I join JAXREIA, but it's like I wanted to just follow Gonzalo everywhere I went. He was just great. He's just a ball of energy, a ton of enthusiasm, and he's somebody you want to follow. And the whole idea behind JAXREIA is you really need to join JAXREIA when you don't know anything, go to as many classes as possible, meet people, because one of the big challenges is there's so many ways to make money in real estate that you always get a shiny penny syndrome of, what do you do and what do you do? And everything sounds interesting and neat early on. So, and like you mentioned, I've been to a lot of JAXREIA meetings. When I moved down from New York, I don't really have a job. I'm gainfully unemployed, I like to say. So, in New York, I traded stocks for a number of years. I had a franchise called Cartridge World. I owned a couple stores. For many years, I was a licensee for Hasbro, the toy company. We organized these game tournaments for a game called Magic the Gathering. So I've done just a crap ton of stuff in different eclectic industries. So when I came down here, it's like I'm not going to get a job, close to 50 at this point. So who the hell's going to hire me? So I've got money. So it's like, all right, let's do something. Let's get involved in real estate. So fast forward a couple months, and dumb luck. And people just don't realize how much of life is a combination of God's good graces and dumb luck. So Obie Dorsey used to run a networking event at the yacht club. So I go to the networking event and I walk in the room and I don't know a soul. So I look around and I see a couple guys shaking this one guy's hand. So I'm like, oh, I'll sit next to that guy. And that guy turned out to be my close friend Mark Marcellus. And he's somebody who had some long-term rentals, had turned them into short-term rentals, was raving about them. And I said, oh, let's have some lunches. And we started talking about it. And eventually I asked Mark to buy me a house. He was a realtor and I was not at the time. And we wound up buying a house on the west side for $112,000. And of course, coming from New York, I didn't know you could buy anything for $112,000, let alone a concrete block house. So I had Mark buy the house. We bought it for cash initially. He furnished it. We turned it into a short-term rental for Florida Georgia weekend 3 years ago. And that weekend, we got $260 a night rent for Florida Georgia weekend. And of course, coming from New York, I don't even know what Florida Georgia weekend is. So, but you learn pretty quickly. And then fast forward another month, and one of the clients we had stay in that house was a young family who lived in Jacksonville. They were out of their house because there was some mold, and the insurance company was willing to put them up in another house. Two parents, a kid, a dog. They can't stay in a hotel. So they rented our house for $100 a night. Now, $100 a night, sounds pretty good, for a $112,000 house. And they were supposed to stay 3 weeks. They wound up staying 4 months. And at $3,000 a month rent, I turned to Mark and I say, this is working out well. We should do this again. And slowly but surely, I have learned a lot over the last 3 years. And now I have, like you said, 16 Airbnbs. I have several under contract and hope to have many more.
So did you end up keeping that property? Do you still have it today?
I do still have it today, even though the appreciation in that area has been pretty decent. So it's always a challenge as to at this point of the market, it's such a strong market right now, and you have to debate whether or not it's time to sell your worst properties. And that's actually my worst property in essence of neighborhood. I've had a couple people go to the property, and I think they weren't crazy about the area. So you always have to think to yourself, do I want to cull my properties to say, okay, sell some of them that have some appreciation, take that money, put it into other properties.
And we'll dive in on the short term, some of the stuff with that, the Airbnb, but is there a difference in trying to invest in that short term rental, the Airbnb, versus like the more longer term holds with like tenants and people that are staying there? Is like there a different value or a different analysis when investing in those?
Well, if you think about long-term rentals, and I'm a big fan of bigger pockets. They talk about the 1% rule. So if you buy a house for 150,000, ideally you'd love to have about $1,500 in rent. It's not really that way anymore. Maybe it's a little less than that. So you try to get about 1%. On a short-term rental, in the niche that we do, and I do a niche of between 150 and $200,000 houses. And there are people who do $400,000 houses. And I met a woman who just bought a castle in St. Augustine for $850,000. So there's all these different niches. In our niche, we try to get between 2.5 to 3 times the monthly rent. So on a $150,000 house, I would be very happy with $3,000 to $4,000 a month in rent, and that's really the number that we shoot for. Do we always make it? No, but sometimes we kill it, and it's those killing it that really bring out the glory that is Airbnb and short-term rentals right now. Let me give you a quick example. I have a house across from the Navy base on 17, and we have just an individual who wanted to rent the house. This guy happens to be a Bitcoin millionaire, and he wanted to rent one of my houses. And it's a nice, 4-bedroom, 2-bath, and he just rented it for the summer, and he's paying us $5,000 a month for 3 months. It's like you only need 1 or 2 of those a year to pay for your whole mortgage. It really is those home runs can make up for the fact that your occupancy might not be that high. Yeah, people talk about occupancy. So a vacancy on a long-term rental, you try to keep it under 5% vacancy. You want to keep it rented for most of the year. On an Airbnb, it's okay to be 30% vacant for the year. That's not a big deal. If you're 95% occupied, you're probably pricing it too low.
Interesting. So where are you finding the most? I mean, I'm glad we're already on the short-term rental question. So like, where are you finding the most success? Like, what are you looking for specifically for that Airbnb property? Are you looking more on the beach side because a lot of people stay there for the vacations? Does it matter if it's more in the Clay County area or on the west side of Jax? Like, what are you looking for in that appreciation or that short-term rental Airbnb that's attractive, that's a home run hit? Like, to you, what's a home run hit?
A home run hit is something that cash flows fantastically, and that could be a small house, it could be a big house. But you bring up a great point. When most people think of Airbnb, they think of beach properties and they think of Avondale and Riverside. That's what people think of when Airbnb. When I tell people that I have a house off 103rd that does $3,500 a month in Airbnb, their head explodes, and they just don't understand how that's possible. And the reason that's possible is because most people think Airbnb is at the beach and in Avondale. And if you look in Jacksonville, and if you go to airdna.co, which what they do is they scrape the data from Airbnb and VRBO, they show you where all the Airbnbs are in Jacksonville. And there are 1,600 Airbnbs in Jacksonville, not including the 700 Airbnbs that are in Jacksonville Beach. So 1,600 in Jacksonville proper, 10% of them are in Avondale and Riverside. So where do you want to start? Well, you don't want to start in Avondale and Riverside. That's where a ton of them are already, and there's probably a lot of price compression. So dumb luck. I wound up buying on the west side because it was cheap. That worked. I'll buy another house on the west side, and then I bought another house on the west side, and then I bought a house across from the Navy base because hey, it's across from the Navy base and it's close to the highway. And that house did so well, I bought another house in that neighborhood. So I mainly concentrate on the west side, but I don't want to have my Airbnbs where everybody else has their Airbnbs because there's got to be more pressure there. And I also don't want for me at least, I don't want to pay $500,000 for an Airbnb and have to do $8,000 or $10,000 or $12,000 a month. If I have an Airbnb where I pay $160,000 for, an Airbnb crapped out tomorrow, I want to be able to turn them into long-term rentals. And you could see based on what happened with COVID last year, Airbnb crapped out. A couple months of literally no reservations, taking money out of your pocket to pay for everything. So it was a real risk. And let's not forget about the fact that Airbnb, even though there are 8 million Airbnbs, there are municipalities that can change the rules. They can make laws to make it much harder. That's something that we live with as a risk as opposed to a long-term rental. But the risk reward for Airbnb right now is very in favor of starting Airbnbs.
So I guess I had multiple questions like when you were talking right there. So I guess two things. One, did you find that the people during COVID that had Airbnbs and they weren't doing so well because everybody was in lockdown, that they now were a motivated seller that wanted to sell that investment property? So you found that opportunity to like almost take that over or buy that property. And two is what what are you finding with the properties that you're buying? Like when people are staying, like, are they there for school? Are they there for vacation? Are they there for visiting family? Like, what is the difference? Because on the beach, I get that they're there for the beach, they're there to enjoy the vacation, that lifestyle. But on the west side, what are they doing?
Right. So let me answer. The first question is, what happened? What happened during lockdown? So a number of people who were Airbnb hosts had decided that they don't want to do this anymore. They're just going to get a long-term tenant, which they perceive as less risk, and it could be less risky. So, but we chose not to do that. But there weren't a lot of houses for sale. One of the challenges right now with the market is that there just are not enough houses for sale. So Jacksonville as a market has usually between 4 and 5 months of inventory. So let's say 3,000 houses sell every month in Jacksonville. Usually the inventory is 9 to 12,000. Right now the inventory is a month and a half of inventory in Jacksonville, and that's why 40% of the houses for sale in Jacksonville go above list price. There's just not enough inventory. So with your second question of who's my ideal client, demographically, my ideal client is one of two categories. One is family who are coming down to visit other family for a wedding, a funeral. They're coming down to the equestrian center. They're coming down not for vacation per se because they're going to the beach, but they're coming to Jacksonville for some number of days. My average stay with them is 4 nights. My second category of clientele is a work crew, and that is the sweet spot. Finding a company that has a contract in Jacksonville that need to put their blue collar workers in a house. So if you have a company that has a contract with Amazon and you have 5 electricians, well, what are your choices? Your choices are I could rent a couple hotel rooms, or for less money, I could rent a house for $150 a night, put 5 guys in the house, 6 guys in the house, 7 guys in the house. They have a shower, they have a kitchen, they keep the place relatively clean, and it's way cheaper. And my average stay on a company is 3 weeks. So they're willing to stay there for 3 weeks. And I've had houses where I've had a company stay in the house for 5 months. Now, if you have a company that's staying in a house for 5 months on a $200,000 house, paying $4 grand a month in rent, that goes really far to paying all your expenses for most of the year.
Incredible. So it's almost like finding a distribution center or finding the companies that are here that bring those workers. And so that's another type of demographic that can be used for Airbnb. Instead of putting them in the hotels, they're getting the Airbnbs and going for the short-term rentals. It's really interesting. I mean, I'm only thinking beach properties and it's on the sand, and so those are the more lucrative short terms. But so
Don't get me wrong, they are lucrative, but you're going to pay a lot more money and potentially have a lot more risk than a house on the west side. Doesn't mean it won't work at the beach. Clearly, if there are 600 or 700 Airbnbs at the beach right now, somebody's making a lot of money.
I got you. So why is Airbnb the hottest trend right now, and how do you know if you should get involved, and is it investment gold?
So why is it the hottest trend right now? Mainly because of COVID. The fact that the lockdown is over. People want to get out. Jacksonville's a perfect city for people traveling from hours away. It's not a city based on Disney. It's not a city based on golf. It has a ton of different attractions, and it has a lot of really inexpensive houses. Even though the median price point, so the median price point in Jacksonville is like 275 right now, which means 50% of the houses are above and below. Compared to Tampa, compared to Orlando, compared to other cities in Florida, Jacksonville is a steal. As far as is this investment gold? The question is, what's your risk tolerance? Running an Airbnb business is not the same as being a landlord for a long-term rental. Being a long-term landlord, it can be a lot more passive. Now, I'm pretty passive with my Airbnb business because I'm willing to hire a property manager and pay him a fee to take care of most of the things that I don't have to do. So I don't have to go to bed at night and worry that somebody's going to call me 3 in the morning saying the AC is not working. But he does, and he has to deal with that. And property managers for Airbnbs can get paid anywhere between 15 and 30% of the gross revenue. And you think, my God, how does anybody make money if you're giving away that much, that much gross revenue? Right? Well, it does. It does make money. And my advice to many people so far has been, look, you should, if you want to try it with one property. It's not for everybody. I've had plenty of people who I've harassed to death to start an Airbnb business, and they've gotten one, and they drank the Kool-Aid, they love it. And I've had other people who have tried it and be like, ugh, this is terrible idea. I would never do that. I don't want to deal with, people worrying about if their sheets are perfect, if this is perfect. So, I mean, it really depends on what kind of business you want to be involved in.
Interesting. So it just really depends what they want to be involved in and what type of investing. So if they wanted to get started in the short term and the Airbnbs, what should someone do as an investor or just getting started? Like, where would you go? What would you do?
I would do the exact same thing I did 3 years ago. I would go to lots and lots of meetings and then talk to people and say, hey, what do you do? Hey, what do you do? Hey, what do you do? And say, do you know anybody who does Airbnbs? Yeah, I was at a meeting last night. Neil Brown runs a networking meeting in Green Cove Springs, and Neil's great. And one of the people who were at the meeting is a woman who lives in St. Augustine. She has a couple of Airbnbs down there, and she joked about the fact that 3 years ago, she would come to a meeting and say she did Airbnb, and everybody would like, Airbnb, that's terrible, that's a fad. And now she comes to a meeting, and every third person's got an Airbnb, and it's not hard to get into it, but there are significantly more costs to get into it than there are for long-term rentals, because the big cost is upfront cost of furnishing the house. So anybody could go out and buy a house off the MLS tomorrow for $250,000, and then that's just step one. Step two is you have to furnish the house. How much are you going to spend on the furnishings? And not just the furnishings, but the forks and knives and spoons and everything you can imagine that comes in an Airbnb. And how do you know what's in an Airbnb? You should stay in an Airbnb. You should go on Airbnb, look for one that has a lot of reviews, and go stay in an Airbnb for one night or 2 nights and see what they have, and talk to the owner. And what do they like about the business? What don't they like about the business? My favorite question is always, if you had to do it again, would you do X? And what you'll find is that the vast majority of people who stay in Airbnbs have a positive experience, and the vast majority of people who own Airbnbs also have a positive experience.
So what's it like furnishing those? I've heard some interesting things that I think I was at Vendor Palooza, or somebody was talking about at Target, like all these Airbnb short-term people come late at night because they're still doing like the inventory or something like that. What's that about? Like, what's that furnishing at Airbnb like?
When we first started the business, Mark and I would go to Target, spend $1,000, walk around with 4 carts like we're on a TV show. And then you would go and put everything in the house. You'd realize, I forgot these 16 things, and I have to go back and buy stuff from Walmart. And we generally would buy used furniture, like nice used furniture. And there's a place up in Arlington that we deal with, a wonderful guy named Paul, who owns Kelly's Furniture, and he's furnished a lot of our Airbnbs. Recently, there's a new company, a staging company called Dwell Staging, owned by Jim and Sally Stock, and they have a new niche where they literally will furnish your entire house from A to Z with everything included in 48 hours. Wow, well, that sounds great. Why would everybody do it? Because it's not cheap, okay? So the difference is you're going to pay a lot more money, but it's going to be on the market so much faster. And I had one experience with them so far. It's been terrific. I probably use them again, but you just have to understand it's expensive. And a lot of people don't realize that after you buy the house, you might have to spend $10,000 or $15,000 to get the house up and running. Also, you should absolutely get professional photography. You should have, make sure you have a cleaner. The most important person on the team beside the property manager is the cleaner. You need somebody who knows how to clean for an Airbnb, which is different than a long-term rental, and somebody who's reliable. Because a lot of times you're going to get a quick turn where somebody's checking out in the morning, somebody's checking in the afternoon. It's not a lot of time there. And if, God forbid, somebody shows up at an Airbnb and it hasn't been cleaned, that is a disaster.
What do you do to get really good reviews? Are reviews really important for your Airbnb properties?
Reviews are super important. One of the things about Airbnb, they have this thing called Superhost. So Superhosts are supposedly the cream of the cream. And we are not Superhosts because we manage a lot of properties, and it's really hard to be a Superhost. You have to have like a 4.8 out of 5 stars. There's a lot of hoops you got to jump through, but reviews are super important, and people know that. And some people try to take advantage of that because they say, hey, if you don't do what I want you to do for me as a client, well, I'm going to leave you a bad review. So they almost blackmail you to a certain degree. But you have to think about it. We are in the hospitality business. We want to make people enjoy the fact that they come to my house, they pay me $150 a night on average, and when they leave, they say, yes, it was definitely worth $150 a night. Wasn't worth $500 a night, but it wasn't worth $20 a night. So we try to do, comfortable sheets and mattresses. We wind up replacing a lot of furniture on a regular basis as we upgrade, and we're learning. We're always learning to, what works and what doesn't.
That's how it is. It's trial and error, seeing what happens with the Airbnb. And are you spending a lot of cost on it? Like, are you going above what your margin should be, or are you making a good amount? Are you getting a home run, a killing off the Airbnb? So Glenn, talk to us about how do you go from zero to a multi-six-figure income in 3 years without knowing anything in real estate? How are you doing it? Like, I mean, you're a numbers guy. You were in the stock game. I mean, making lots of money, but there's people that are just starting from zero. So how do you get from zero to that million, to that seven-figure, higher? Who knows?
How does a baby learn to walk? One step at a time. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. You have to go out, figure out what your goal is. If your goal is to start an Airbnb business, we'll start with one. Now, there's two options. There's one option where you could buy a house, and if you don't have the money to buy a house, you could partner with other people. And if you don't have that, you could do what's called arbitrage. Arbitrage is effectively going to a landlord and saying, hey, I'd like to rent your house for a reasonable rent, and then I'm going to put it on Airbnb, and I'm going to try to make the difference. Of course, the risk with that is if I can't rent your house out, I have to pay the rent. So just figure out a way to beg, borrow, or steal money to buy your first house. And then once you have a house, just talk to other people. The goal is really to figure out who has done what you want to do and ask them, how did you get there? So how did I get there? I started with one, it worked out well, and we just bought another. Now, a lot of times when I buy a house, I use hard money to buy the house, some of my money, some from a private money or hard money company. And then I refinance out after 3 months or 6 months or whatever. And I refinance out into a 30-year fixed loan because the goal is to have long-term fixed debt and have inflation help me out. So over the course of years, the price of the house will slowly appreciate. The inflation will cause rents to go up. It'll cause Airbnb fees to go up, and the dollar will go down. So the goal is to have long-term assets with fixed debt.
So that leads us to that. I love that saying, the beg, borrow, steal, but the borrow part, which is key for you because you do a lot of the private money, private lending side to things, and people that are trying to get in the game but don't have any money to start, you can help on that end, building that relationship with you and get to that next level, right?
Correct. So, when I first came down to Jacksonville, I was fortunate that we had sold our apartment in New York. We had some money, and people had talked about the idea of talking to flippers. Well, it's like I'm talking to flippers, but I can't really add any value to flippers. So if I wanted to learn how to do the flipping business, and I go to a flipper and I say, hey, can you help me out? They're going to be like, well, what do you give me? What value can you add, provide me? And what I had is I had money. So I literally went to a networking meeting because that's what you need to do. You need to go to networking meetings and talk to people. And I literally stood up at a meeting and I said, hey, I've got some money if somebody'd like to borrow some money. And shockingly, somebody came up to me and said, hey, I'd like to borrow some money. And it was a young couple who had flipped some houses. I had some meetings with them. I did my due diligence. I looked at the projects that they had done before. I called their references. And I said, sure. And I wound up loaning him money on a house. And I kind of followed him around and saw what he did, decided flipping is not the thing I want to do. But he did great. He took a house that he bought for $100,000 and eventually sold it for $250,000. And he made a lot of money. And I got paid my 10% or 12% interest, and I got paid back. And that was the easiest money that I've ever made in my life because I knew that he was a person who was going to do what he said he was going to do. I got paid back at the end because he couldn't sell the house without paying me back. And then I said, oh, let's do that again. And I slowly but surely, reached out to different people, generally experienced flippers, and I tried to get them to say, look, dealing with me is easier than dealing with other people. And let me help you try to grow your business. Your goal is to flip houses. I can help you with the financing on some of them. And then I just grew the business from there.
I was going to ask is like, what is your criteria for the people that are needing that money? Like you just said, like the flippers, you like this, the more the seasoned side to the investing. What is your criteria and list for the private lending?
Mainly my criteria is what have you done before? Show me what you've done. And are you the kind of person that is going to do what they say they're going to do? So if you're a brand new flipper and you've never flipped a house before, I'm probably not going to lend you money. But I will tell you, go find somebody who's experienced and do a joint venture with them, and then I'd probably lend you money. But ideally for me, it's like I don't really care. I don't care what your credit score is. I don't care, about your personal tax returns. What I care about is the asset. What is the house worth as is? And then what will the house be worth after repair value, ARV? And now that I'm a realtor, I can do the comps. I can try to figure out, roughly, what the numbers are going to be. And I always ask, you want to borrow $150,000 for a flip? Okay, tell me what you think the after repair value is going to be, and why do you think that? Show me comps to show that you know what you're doing. And I walk through the house, okay, explain to me what your rehab budget is. Why is it that? Why is your rehab budget $30,000, not $60,000? What happens if you run out of money? Well, where else are you going to get it? Because I'm not going to loan you all the money. I'm going to loan you most of the money. And that you need to have some skin in the game, because God forbid you walk outside tomorrow and get hit by a bus. All I care about is getting back my money. I don't care about how much I make. I care about how much I can lose. And that comes from trading stocks. When you trade stocks for a living, you could go home and make $10,000 in a day and think it was the worst day of your life, because the guy next to you made $20,000. And you're like, what the hell's wrong with me that I only made $10,000? So it's risk management, and you try to manage the risk of what is the worst case scenario in this situation. So I only lend to flippers who have some experience with what they're doing, and have a real vision of how they're going to get out of it.
Very interesting. So there's two components to this, right? There's the people that are looking for you, right? The people that are looking to get that help on their first deal or their second deal. Well, actually, they're more seasoned flippers, so they really want to get that flip. They need that extra lift to get to the next level for their flip, so they can get it out to the end buyers. But then there's the other side, which is what you do. That a lot of people are inspired about doing the private lending. And on a couple other episodes, I had Nate Hare. He's part of the New View Trust. They do the IRA lending or the IRA stuff. And he was talking about how you can lend out of your IRA. You could be the private lender out of your IRA.
That is the secret sauce right there, Al. The goal is, once you have money, okay, in life, you work for money. And at some point, you need to have your money work for you. And the way you do that is by lending your money out either for private businesses or real estate investing. And that is the goal. And when you have IRA money or 401k money, you could put that into what's called a self-directed account, which means that you don't just have to buy stocks and bonds. And I have done this with a number of individuals where we've split loans. So if you've never done private money before, but you have some money, you have $10,000, you have $25,000 sitting in the bank making 0 or 1%, come to one of our meetings, talk to me or talk to one of the other people who do hard money, and we would love to split a loan with you. And you could kind of like follow along and see what we do. I do all the due diligence. I make sure that we get paid back. I'm not going to say it's totally risk-free, but it's fairly low risk on the scale of risk. But private lending really is the goal of life, because as you grow your IRAs, tax-free or tax-deferred, the goal is eventually later in life, you want to have a, like Robert Kiyosaki says, you need to have passive income more than your expenses. Once your passive income is higher than your monthly expenses, you can live forever. And that's the goal. The goal is to be financially free. And that's what real estate more than anything else does. I've never met a larger group of people whose sole goal is financial freedom. You could have a job and you talk to people and they complain about the job and they complain about their wife, and they complain about their kids. And if you hang out with those people, you're going to complain about the job and complain about your wife and complain about the kids also. When you get involved in real estate, you have the opportunity, unlike almost everybody else, to be in rooms of people who want to grow their wealth, they want to pass along their wealth to their family. They don't want to work 80 hours a week. They want to work no hours a week. They want to have their money work for them. And if I had enough money where I could just lend it out and not do anything but sit on the beach, believe me, I'd be sitting on the beach.
Incredible. I mean, who doesn't want to sit on the beach? I want to sit on the beach. I mean, if this is the area to be in, and it's amazing. And yeah, you're right. These are people in this community, the investors and the real estate community that want to get this passive income flow. So these are amazing tools and amazing ways to strategize and invest in real estate that can take you to that level. So everybody that's watching out there, we're still going here with Glenn. So if you have a question, make sure you type it in the chat box for the video, for this live right now. Ask away. I have Glen Friedman here. He's the short-term rental master and the private lending guru, and he loves to talk about this stuff. He loves to help and educate people in the community on how you can take it from zero to getting your first deal and to keep going. He's done this, so ask away. It's incredible resources right here for you. So Glenn, let me ask you this. On the loans, how do you determine your rates and the interest and the terms? Like depending on the deal, like what are you kind of looking at average wise with the interest and rates?
Well, when I first started, I didn't know anything about private money, so I literally just asked other people, how much do you pay for private money, and how much do you pay for hard money? And there's a big private money lender in Jacksonville that we all know and love, and he charges 12% in annual interest, 1% a month, and 2% upfront. Generally 2% upfront, and that so the 2% origination fee kind of covers my time and effort on preparing all the stuff I need to get all the docs done. So on a $100,000 loan, you'll pay $2,000 at closing, which is 2%. And then you'll pay 1% a month for interest. So $1,000 a month. And the average loan is 6 months. So the goal here is to try to turn your money. And what I mean by turning your money is I want to put the money out, get the money back, put the money out again, get the money back, and try to make money on the points as well as the interest. But if you think, wow, 12% sounds like a lot of interest, the amount of money I make versus the amount of money the flippers make, is fairly insignificant. I've loaned money to a guy where I made $3,000 on the loan, he made $30,000 on the flip. It's like, God bless. I mean, also, real estate, you can't find other places where you meet people who just got into business and I did $20,000 on a wholesale deal, I did $50,000 on a flip. I've done flips too, poorly. I've lost money on this flip, I've made a little on that flip. Flipping is not for me. But for a lot of people who love it, and I'll give you an example, is I lent money to a woman recently on a house in Lakeshore. And I walk into the house and I'm like, God almighty, this house is a horror show. And I'm like, I can't even imagine what she's going to do with the house. 6 weeks later, I go back in the house and it's gorgeous. And I'm like, this is the person I want to lend to 100 times over, because she has the vision that I don't have that skill set. She had the vision of what the house is going to look like. And she's going to take a $100,000 house and she's going to sell it for $250,000. And somebody's going to walk in that house and be like, I love this house. And it's like, and I love the fact that you love the house, so I can get my money back, so I could give it out again.
Incredible. It's helping other people figure out how they can strategize and get in the investing game, which is amazing. So Glenn, thank you for what you do. And Glenn, let's talk about this. You're not just a group leader, you're a super group leader. You're a huge group leader, and you host the JAXREIF group, where you bring all these people together in the community and you talk about this on a monthly basis. You bring different people in that have successes in the game, whether it's short-term rentals, people doing probate, people doing other big things in the community, but you have a huge base of people that show up at the luncheons. And I love it. When I showed up there, I couldn't believe how many people were there. It was incredible. It had people in the back. You had people all around. Everybody went around to say like what they did in their business, how they did it. And you bring different people all the time. So what is it like to take lead and charge of a successful monthly group? I know there was at the last Yellowbird meeting, I remember Ryan Rice, he's a newer investor, but he's killing it right now. He wants to do his own breakfast thing on a monthly basis in St. Augustine or St. John's area. And it's interesting that people see these group meetings and they want to start their own thing. So what is like the best practices to start doing these groups, and how do you make it really happen and successful with a solid turnout every single time?
The goal is the same goal as everything else. You need to get out and do stuff. Okay. And once you do stuff with people want to hang out with other people who do stuff. So when I had started going to the Whitey's meeting, which was run by Deb Bracknell. So she started effectively another group called JAXREIA, and her idea was she wanted to have a monthly meeting where she didn't sell anything, and she did a local meeting in Clay County, which was Fleming Island. And I started going to the meeting, and there were 4 people, 6 people, 8 people. It wasn't that great, and unfortunately, Deb got sick, and I was asked to take over the meeting, and I just started asking people, what do you want to see in a meeting? What is the goal here? How do we help? How do we add value to other people? I have been very blessed, not just in life, but also here. I came down from New York, and obviously I open my mouth down here, and people are like, oh, you're from New York, huh? And so many people have been so giving of their time and effort that one of my goals is to give back. So you start talking to people, people get to know you. They know you do things in real estate, and they start coming to the meetings. And then you ask, what would you like to do? So we start bringing in speakers. Last month we had a speaker talk about insurance. We brought you in to talk about probate. We had somebody talk about IRAs. In August, we have a CPA coming in talking about saving ways, how to save money on taxes. These are things that people want to talk about. And except for Yellowbird, we're one of the large. I mean, it's a small group, but we're one of the larger small groups in town. And people should start other groups. Jackie Herr started a group which meets once a month downtown. She has like 60 or 80 people at the group. I've heard it's a killer group, and you should just go and get involved and meet more people. And that's one of the challenges with real estate is people. You go on YouTube and you buy this book and you buy this course and you buy this and you buy that. You never do anything. It's just so easy to go on YouTube and buy shit as opposed to go out and do shit. So the goal is to do something. And I try to highlight that every month. The meeting is not going around and saying, what do you do? The meeting starts at the end of the meeting when you could go up and talk to people and say, hey, I'm this, and I'd like to find out about this, and hey, can you help me with that? That's the meeting. Everything else is before the meeting.
We're going to make sure that you get a quote card for that and a micro video clip where it starts with that whole thing and then gets into what you just said. So great right there. We'll make sure JP gets that. You're right. You're right, Glenn. I mean, you got to just start it and you got to get that following, but you also have to have really interesting people that are talking about really interesting things that everybody wants to learn about. It's not the same thing over and over and over again. And again, like I said, when I first started is that one of the big things I wanted to do is bring on the group leaders of these real estate places and interview them. And it's amazing that not only are you just the investor and you're doing the private money stuff, but you're also a group leader. And so it means a lot when you're able to bring the community together. And yes, it's a big, small group. It was really big when I went, and I'm sure it's like that every meeting. So make sure you check out Glenn's group if you're in the Jacksonville area, the Clay County area, St. John's area. JAXREIA. We'll make sure we put the Chiron up. They meet at Whitey's Fish Camp, Orange Park, Fleming Park. When's the next meeting, Glenn?
It's always the fourth Tuesday for lunch. The fourth Tuesday of the month for lunch. We're going to keep it that way because it's hard to change.
It's great. When you have it that way, it works. So make sure you check it out. And Glenn, why don't you tell us about Pat Flynn? Why is he so damn good looking, and why does he get all the breaks?
Yeah, that's what I want to know too. Why is Pat Flynn so damn good looking, and how does he get all the breaks? And it really comes down to one thing, which is Pat is just fucking much better than everybody else. Pat is just the guy who just lives and breathes grit and perseverance. And if there's anybody who you should talk to, it's Pat Flynn. If there's anybody who you should watch on YouTube and watch his videos, it's just Pat Flynn. He is just raw. He comes out and tells you like it is, like it or not, drops F-bombs all over the place. It's great. But he is just somebody who's willing to say, I'm willing to do whatever the effort takes to get me to where I want to be. And the vast majority of people you're going to meet in life are not going to be that way. Pat Flynn is a rare bird, no pun intended, but he is the person who you should try to emulate. And you should get around people like him, because if you're the smartest guy in the room, you're in the wrong room. If you're the richest guy in the room, you're in the wrong room. You need to bump up your game by meeting more successful people and hanging out with people who you want to emulate 5 or 10 years from now. Why does Pat have all the good luck? Because he brings the fortune favors the bold. And Pat is bold, and that's why God has blessed Pat with his good graces.
When was the first time you met Pat, saw Pat, and recognized that in him, like that greatness?
It was an early meeting, one of the Homevester meetings where he just stood up and talked about his goal or what he was talking about, and he just exudes confidence. Here's a guy when you meet him, he's a rough and tumble guy. I don't want to be Pat in a dark alley; he'd beat the shit out of you, So, but here's a guy who just when he says he's going to do it, he's going to do it. He doesn't care. He's gonna crawl over broken glass to get to his goal. And that should be most people's goals in life. What are your goals? how do I get there? And if I don't know how to get there, just talk to people who have gotten to where you want to go and ask, how did you get here? This is not the Pat Flynn show, but I do love Pat Flynn.
Hey, I'm a fan. You're a fan. We all love Pat Flynn. So yeah, he's a different kind of bird. You're right. I mean, he has that confidence, and he tells you how it is, and he gets right down to it. He's a straight shooter, and I love that style. I know you love that style, and
yeah, coming from New York, it's hard not to be just a blunt, loudmouth New York Jew.
I mean, you got to be like that, right? I mean, you tell it how it is, and we love that style. So, Glenn, I mean, this has been great. This is tons of value for people out there that are watching. We'll make sure we keep all your information going, and we have questions. People have asked questions, so we're going to make sure we put that up. But Glenn, just so everybody knows, how can they get in touch with you, and who are you looking to get in touch with you?
So ideally, how do people get in touch with you? I'm on Facebook. Yeah, I'm past the demographic of having Snapchat and Instagram, stuff like that. I don't have a lot of that stuff. I'm kind of a Luddite in that area, but I'm on Facebook regularly, and I go to a lot of JAXREIA meetings, stuff like that. And I'm generally always around. And you can always just go to my website, which is just gramercyunion.com. Gramercy Union is just named for two of the neighborhoods I lived in New York, Gramercy Park and Union Square.
Great.
As far as what kind of people I'm looking to meet, I'm looking to meet people who are going to do what they say they're going to do. Whether or not they're flippers, whether or not they're people who want to get involved in lending out their private funds, if the people who want to learn about Airbnbs, I want doers. I don't want talkers. I talk enough.
Yeah, it's hard to find, but they're out there. There's people that really want to do this. They've never been in investing before, or they're in investing, but they don't have the capital, the help that they need. So the things that you're able to offer can really pull them over that finish line, especially the flippers that are seasoned or have been doing this for a little while that really need that help. Reach out to Glenn. Glenn's the type of guy, you could just see it. He loves the relationship, right? Build the relationship, get to know Glenn, meet Glenn, go to the meeting at Whitey's Fish Camp and talk to Glenn and find out more about what he does, and just be there, be present. And that's all you got to do, is just really be there with people and connect with great people. So Glenn, we're going to dive in on the questions. We got the first one. I'm hoping I can see it on the screen this time, but it says from Dominic Felix. Let's see what it says. What is the current market value of that first $112,000 property?
Probably about $175,000. So if you think about it, okay, so it's now it's worth $175,000. If I can sell it for $175,000, make about 60 grand of profit, what am I going to do with that profit? Can I take that profit and turn it into maybe two houses? And that's one of the questions. That's one of the questions I have. Can I take that $60,000 plus the money I have invested and put it in a better neighborhood? So the whole idea of culling your portfolio, you take your worst houses, try to sell those, buy houses in better areas that may appreciate a little better over time. That's one of the questions I wrestle with.
There you go. And then we have Michael, who asked, how much money do you need to start private lending?
If you talk to the IRA companies, they will tell you that you need almost no money to start private lending, because you could do what are called wrap loans. Now, wrap loans are a little fancy, where you take your money and wrap it with somebody else's money to get a combined better interest rate for you. But I've had people come to me with $10,000. I put them into a loan with me. That's probably the lowest that I've seen people do. But I mean, again, you'd be shocked at how many people have money either sitting in the bank or sitting in an IRA making nothing, that they can lend out with secure real estate, be in the first position mortgage. So the risk is small. It's there, but it's small. And they can wind up making 6, 8, 10, 12% interest, just much better returns. And if you want to get involved, definitely reach out to me. I love talking about private lending.
There you go. Reach out to Glenn. He's got all the stuff right there. And the next question that we had was, do the numbers, who is it from? Naveen. He said, do the numbers / ROI still work in the Airbnb model for someone who's just starting?
Yeah, I don't think just starting has any effect on whether or not the numbers work. So my numbers work in the sense of if I want to buy a house for $175,000 now, so $175,000, my goal is, after I cash out refi, whatever money I leave in the house. So let's say I wind up leaving $25,000 in the house equity wise. My goal is to make a 20% cash on cash return on that money. So let's say buy a house for $175,000 with a combination of my money, private money. After 6 months, I get a long-term loan. I have to wind up leaving $25,000 in equity in the house. So my goal is to make 20% on that, so $5,000 net. So I need to make $400 net profit to justify leaving that money in the house. No doubt it could work. It'll work in this market every day of the year. You could buy a house tomorrow on the MLS and do it. The question is this a business that you want to get involved in? And it's not for everybody. It's not for a lot of people. It is a pain in the ass, but the returns are there.
They're there. So, and then we have Michael. Michael's got a question. What do you think the best way to continue to scale upward quickly through Airbnb?
It's a great question. And I wrestle with that all the time. I have 16 Airbnbs. I probably have 20 by the end of the year. My question is always, why don't I have 40? Why don't I have 100? At some point, there will be a glut of Airbnbs. Now, whether or not that's a year from now or 10 years from now, I have no idea. But at some point, there will be so many Airbnbs that the prices will come down and you will not be able to get the returns. But I don't know if that's going to be sometime in the future. How to scale quickly? You could scale by arbitraging. You could find landlords who are willing to rent rent their house from them and furnish the house and then put it on Airbnb. So that's one way to do it. It's not so easy to find. I mean, long-term landlords are generally skeptical of the Airbnb model. So it's not that hard. In all of the meetings I had gone to, I only convinced one person to arbitrage their house, and this was a house out in Sandalwood. Turned out to be great. Eventually, I bought the house from them. It was just a terrific house for us. The other way to scale is find rich friends. Find somebody with money who you're willing to say, look, I'd like to get the cash flow, and I can give you a 8 or 10% return on your money over the course of each year over the course of 3 years. And again, there are plenty of people with money out there. Plenty of people who say, ooh, Airbnb, that sounds hot. We should get involved. And you should try to find somebody who is excited about Airbnb as you are, but you should probably do one on your own before you go out and say, hey, let's do this Airbnb thing together. I have no clue. You have no clue. Let's do no clues together.
Just try it. Just go for it. Make it happen with Airbnbs. And then we have Yusuf. Do houses or apartments do better in Jacksonville for short-term rentals?
Apartments are dangerous. Okay, and the reason they're dangerous is because a lot of apartment owners don't allow short-term rentals. So you have to be very careful. Airbnbs do not work in HOA neighborhoods. And the reason they don't work is because they're HOA neighborhoods. HOA neighborhoods don't want Airbnbs in their neighborhood. A lot of apartments in Jacksonville are run by big management companies. They don't want Airbnbs in their apartment complexes. Now, if you were to go out and buy an apartment, buy a duplex, buy a quad, you could do it on your own. And yes, it'll work in both. It's just a different model. Who's the ideal client? If you have a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment, it's going to be very different than having a 3 or 4 bedroom house. Right now, I mentioned before, there are 1,600 Airbnbs in Jacksonville, not including the beach. 70% of them are 2 bedrooms and down. Studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms. The blue ocean is 3 and 4 and 5 bedroom houses. The vast majority of people don't think of those as Airbnbs, so they just, it's like, I want to get an Airbnb, so I get an apartment. For not that much more, you could get a 3 bedroom house, and I try to get with at least a bath and a half, and there's a lot less competition in that part of the marketplace than apartments. It can work in both, but it's different demographics as far as who's going to rent.
This is amazing stuff for everybody out there that really wants to get in short-term Airbnb. If you're not connecting with Glen Friedman, I mean, there's no better person that understands this stuff on a high level like Glen. Because
there's a lot of better people.
But Glen, you know this stuff, really. You know it. You got it inside and out. But how to get started, right? If you've never done it before or you've done one and now you want to start scaling, this is the person to talk to. So great questions that we have. I mean, I love when we have guests that have a lot of knowledge and people are asking questions. So feel free to keep asking questions. You got Glen live. We're live right now. This is incredible. And now this is Lee. So Lee says, do you use a property manager for your Airbnb?
I do. So I use a property manager for my Airbnb. The vast majority of Airbnbs on the planet are run by owner-operators. The vast majority of people have one Airbnb. They do it themselves. They do it for some extra money. Very few people have more than 5 or 10 Airbnbs. I would tend to say probably it's under 10% of Airbnb hosts have that many properties. But my goal, like everybody's goal, is passive income. So the reason I call it passive is because I don't have to answer the phone at night. I'm willing to give up a piece of my revenue every day so that I don't have to take the call at night. Do I like the fact that I'm giving thousands and thousands of dollars a month to my property manager? Sure, because I don't have to. I don't have to answer those calls every night. He loves what he does, and I love what I do.
There you go. That's the benefit of having one. You got to have one. And I think we got everything. Glenn, I mean, these were great questions. Everybody's paying attention. They love Glen Friedman. They love the knowledge that you have. So we make sure we always put your contact info below, the email, the phone number, the company, where they can find you on Facebook. Glenn, before we part ways, any final thoughts on the whole Airbnb, short-term rental, private money, any inspiring things, final thoughts?
The final thoughts is to go out and do stuff, do something, do a deal. Because later on, when you look back, the best time to get involved in real estate was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. Get involved, do something. The first deal will not matter to you 5 or 10 years from now. What will matter to you are the appreciating assets that you will have for you, your family, and your legacy.
Love it. There's so many benefits you can use with the short-term Airbnb, and you have all these properties, amazing properties that you can keep and get cash flow from, passive cash flow, and make money. So Glenn, thank you so much for taking the time out of your night to join me on the show. I love seeing you in the community. I love seeing you at the Yellowbirds and all the amazing groups. And I love that group that you're doing in the JAXREIA at Whitey's Fish Camp. It's fantastic. So Glenn, thank you so much. It's been
Al, thank you.
Load of information. Thank you.
Really do appreciate it. Thanks, Al.
You got it. All right, everybody. Did you love that episode with Glen Friedman? I mean, tons of knowledge with short-term rentals, short-term investing, with the Airbnbs and private money lending and how to go from 0 to 6 figures. I think there's just so much information that you can tap into and understand from Glen Friedman. He's an incredible guest. If you want more content like this and all these other guests that have been on the show, on the Al Nicoletti Show, you can check out iTunes and Spotify. I have the podcast there under the Al Nicoletti Show. You can check the video versions out on YouTube, on the YouTube channel, Al Nicoletti, and all the micro content that's dropping with the show, different guests that I've had on in the past, and people that have been live on the show on Facebook and Instagram at Attorney Nicoletti. And you can check out the Facebook profiles and the business page under Al Nicoletti. And there's tons of other videos out there on all the things with probates, partitions, and different things that we're doing constantly in the law world and all of that stuff. But amazing guests that we have like Glen Friedman and all the amazing people we've had on the show. Make sure you check it out on all the channels. And I will see you next time on the Al Nicoletti Show. Take care.